Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at Tecware's new Forge M2. 10% less in price, 10% less in size. Is it suitable for your next build? Let's find out. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at Tecware's Forge M2. This is the latest version in their Forge range. This is essentially a cut down version of the Forge M, which you can check out, which we reviewed up here. I actually quite like that case, not bad at all. Pretty decent price, pretty flexible, all those kinds of usual things. So Tecware have come out with this. This is essentially 10% smaller, so it's about 40 to 50 mil lower, and also about 40 or 50 mil more squat. So it is a more compact tower. So this is suitable for ITX and micro ATX motherboards, and it's actually got a pretty decent amount of room in there. You can fit in there a 165mm tower cooler. You can also fit into up to a 300mm graphics card, and also up to a 180mm power supply. And that is actually with the hard drive tray actually still installed. Obviously, take the tray out, you can put a much bigger power supply in, should you wish to, or should you need to. So first of all, obviously one of the most striking things you can see at the front is this really nice mesh front panel with this nice angular design. I really like that. I think it looks really, really good. It deflects and diffuses light differently on different angles because of all the different shapes and sizes, but it's not overly harsh. The angles are kind of softened off, so it's not really harsh, and actually adds a sense of kind of a premium feel to it. I'm not sure what you think. Let me know in the comments below. The front panel comes off pretty easily. All you do is there's a pull handle on the front, so you can just pull that off and remove it, which we'll do now. So it comes off relatively easily, so for cleaning purposes, which potentially you might need to do because this is effectively the only filter actually for the PC itself in terms of intake other than what we've got for the power supply. No included magnetic filters with this whatsoever. This is literally all it is for filtration. So if you are in one of those particularly dusty environments, first, why are you buying an airflow case? But secondly, you might want to invest in a dust buster to keep this thing clean. With the front panel out of the way, we can see two of our included fans. There are three included fans on here, which are 120mm fans. Sadly, they are static speed fans, so they are going to spin at somewhere in the region of about 1000 RPM constantly, all the time, no matter what you do. They are daisy chained as well, so they all share addressable RGB. There is a pass-through on the RGB, which we'll take a look at shortly, which is for your 5V 3-pin addressable RGB, although the rest of it is pretty much all a closed system, so should you wish to modify it or even do something as rudimentary as changing your fan speeds, sadly you can't, which again is one of the reasons why, if you can, possibly go for the Forge M if you do want to have full control of your fans with that included fan hub. This front section lends itself well to water cooling, should you wish to, because obviously we've got a lot of mesh here, a lot of airflow. So if you wanted to, you could either remove the fans, put in a 240mm AIO, you can have that in front, or you can have it behind, should you wish to. Again, choice is down to you. Certainly there is an option to. Sadly, there isn't enough height actually in the chassis itself to add another 120mm fan, which for some people, you may prefer the look with 3 fans. I actually quite like the look with 2 fans, especially on a more squat case like this. Moving around to the side of the case, so we can see one of the highlights. I actually really like this design. We've got one of these hinged panels, which is actually a little bit on the difficult side to get off. It's a very kind of tight balancing act between having handles and all those kinds of things and actually having a nice, sleek, clean look. And as you can see, it is an exceptionally sleek look. But if you want to open up the side panel, there is a little indentation down the bottom here. So you just put your finger in and you can pull it out. It's not the easiest of things to do, so you might want to lift it up slightly. It could be the angle I'm on. There's some super strong magnets on there as well, so it's not going to accidentally come open if you tilt the case over, that kind of thing. And as you can see, we've got a pretty much full travel on that side panel. You can remove it in its entirety, just lift it off the hinges. That comes off pretty easily. Let's see how easily it goes back on. Quite often, they don't offset these. Actually, that one's quite easy to do, so yeah, quite happy with that. That's okay. As you can see, the glass itself is completely transparent. There's no tint to it whatsoever. Some people may prefer that, some people dislike it. Again, down to individual personal preference. I actually quite like the clear look because then the RGB on the inside looks exactly the same as the RGB on the front. So happy days as far as that's concerned. So let's take a look actually inside the case now. So as you can see on this bottom section, this is something which has, in my mind, been improved drastically over the Forge M. We have a solid basement section on this front. I prefer that. I don't like to see my power supply in there, especially when we're talking about slightly more budget builds. You possibly are going to skimp a little bit on your power supply, so potentially you might not want the branding showing on your power supply. You just want to show off what's actually in here with your lighting, etc. So for me, that works perfectly. I like that a lot. The top section here is, again, I think it's done particularly well. There is some ventilation there, so we've got the kind of pinhole ventilation, which you can probably just about make out. I'll give you some better footage of that also. It's semi-solid, so there are ventilation holes to let a little bit of airflow through. If you've got hard drives, mechanical drives, that kind of thing, generating a little bit of heat down there, some of the heat will naturally rise up through that small mesh, but it's not small enough, or it's not large enough rather, so if you drop a screw or something, it's going to fall down into the basement and be a real pain. And also, because there's not going to be a great deal of airflow going through here, this bit's going to be relatively easy to keep clean, which is going to be great if you've got a graphics card in here. Because micro ATX is a little bit on the lower side, you've got a very sort of shallow area of actually being able to get in there and keep it clean, so that's all good. I like that a lot. At the back, there's two really big holes for passing through your connectors for your HD audio, USB headers, all that kind of stuff. I like that as well because it's easier to pass through the cables. You can, if you want to, install the power supply first, then pass your cables through. It doesn't impede on that. There's actually a really good gap, which we'll see when we spin it round. So taking a look a little bit further in, so we have got a pretty decent layout in here for micro ATX or ITX boards. Pre-installed 6 of the pillars, so you will need to put an extra 2 pillars in for slightly wider boards, so that's all good. Nice pass-throughs there for your ATX main 24-pin connector, and also down the bottom there for graphics cards should you want to, that kind of stuff. And moving up to the top, there's some reasonably nice sized cutouts at the top for your EPS connector, your 4+4 connector. Pretty decent, like that, works for me. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more height in this top section. You can, if you want to, in the top section, you can put 2 120mm fans. You cannot put a radiator in there. That is completely out of the question. There just isn't enough clearance room because of obviously the smaller dimensions of the case. But 2 fans up there is no problem at all. So you are going to be limited radiator-wise to a 240 up the front, or a 120, or possibly a 120 on the rear if you wanted to remove the fan. Talking of fans, obviously there is another 120mm fan there at the back, which is all daisy chained through. In a strange world, that is the kind of the master fan, if that is even the right terminology for it. So because the fans are all daisy chained, the one at the back is the one that takes the power and also the addressable RGB signal, and also the signal from the reset button, so you can use that to cycle through the colors. And then that distributes that signal to the other fans. Again, we don't have any fan control as in speeds, so they are all going to be spinning at that static speed, which potentially might be a little bit too noisy for some. We'll do some sound tests of that a little bit later so you can listen to it and see what it's like. For me personally, I think because the fans are static speed and because of the size of the case really lends itself well to actually being put on your desk next to you. So if you've got a slightly smaller desk setup, you can have this on the desk, lots of room, have your monitor, keyboard and mouse, and you're going to have your PC right next to you. But do you want to have it right next to you when the fans are spinning at a constant speed, which is actually quite fast? Anyway, let's move on. So on the back, we've got the removable PCI Express slot covers. These are captive ones, sadly, so you do have to kind of bend them out of the way to remove them should you need to. So if you decide to put a GPU in, then at a later date you put an iGPU and you don't need a graphics card, you are going to have to source some of these, which isn't the end of the world. On a normal budget case, perfectly acceptable. This case, which I haven't actually touched on yet, is the price. I did say it's about 10% cheaper than its bigger brother, the Forge M. In the UK at the moment, at the time of filming, which is the beginning of March 2022, you can pick up the Forge M, the larger brother, for somewhere in the region of about £50 to £55. This one you can pick up for somewhere in the region between kind of £45 to £50. So there is a little bit of a gap there between them. Again, it's going to come down to size on which one you're going to end up going for, I feel. So moving up from there, we've got a screw just to hold those in place, pretty much standard deal. Space here for the 120mm fan, a little bit of adjustment up and down, only about 1 inch, so not a great deal. Obviously you've got your IO shield cut out there, all nicely rounded off, so that's all good. Obviously power supply at the bottom also. So let's move around to the back. So nice to see that the back side panel is completely flat. I do dislike the ones with the bulge on. I don't know why, it just annoys me. And also if there's a bulge there, it means that cable management is potentially going to be a nightmare, which in this case actually looks like it's going to be absolutely fine. The back panel itself is kind of flimsy, but yeah, again, it's a smaller panel. It's lightweight as well, so you have to take the rough with the smooth. So looking into the back, let's break this down a little bit. So we've got the wiring from the front I/O section. There's actually quite a lot of wires here. Most of it is actually to do with the RGB setup, which is kind of all of this. So let's put that to one side for now. We've got a nice big cutout there for gaining access to the back of your CPU cooler if you're putting a custom cooler in, or you need to find your back plate, that kind of stuff. So that's nice and easy to do. Plenty of tie down points in various areas for cable management purposes. There is a little caddy here, which you can use for 2.5-inch drives, SSDs or mechanical drives. So that's absolutely fine. Drive-wise, actually, on the box, it says what drives are actually can be put in here. And I think they've made a slight mistake on that because it says one SSD, which obviously, yes, you can put one here. There's also space on the floor of the hard drive cage. You can put one drive in the bottom there, or you can put one on the actual top of it, or you can put in here a single 3.5-inch drive if you remove the cage. If you keep the cage in, you can put two 3.5-inch drives, one on the bottom, one on the top. So essentially you could probably put 3 SSDs in here if you wanted to, or two 3.5-inch drives and one 2.5-inch drive. Hopefully that makes some sense. It didn't make sense as I was saying it, so hopefully it makes sense as I watch this back in the edit. Anyway, moving on. So cutouts, got some nice size cutouts there for cables to go through. Again, 24-pin main ATX connector at the bottom of your graphics card connectors, that kind of thing, or maybe if you're putting water cooling in, some cables from the fans, etc. Space in the bottom for power supply, 180mm. You'll see some pictures now which I've taken earlier. If you put the power supply in, you've got around about a finger's width of gap there, so for passing through cables for your USB 3 or for HD audio, very easy to do, which is something I'm very glad to see. That makes life considerably easier rather than trying to crush a power supply down, trying to wedge the cables through. So in terms of actually building a PC in this, it's going to be very straightforward. Talking of straightforward, actually, there's not a great deal to connect on the front panel either. So we've got a USB 3.0 header, which has got 2 cables coming off it. So that obviously means that good things are going to happen because we've got 2 USB 3.0 ports on the front. We've also got a HD audio connection. Sadly, not entirely sleeved up to the very end, which is not the end of the world, but it would have been nice to have seen. And when it comes down to the front panel connections, so we've got a pretty basic affair, so HDD LED, which is your hard drive LED. You've also got your power LED, and also there is a power switch. There isn't a reset switch because, well, there is a reset switch on the front, but there isn't a connector for it because that is being used to kind of swap through our addressable RGB. So you press the reset button, press it and hold it, and it transfers the signal from either the kind of the onboard system or to your motherboard. So if you want to connect up a motherboard which has an addressable RGB header, you can use the 3-pin 5-volt connection or the pass-through VDG connection for gigabyte boards and some other boards. Very simple, straightforward, that makes a lot of sense. What doesn't make a great deal of sense is this other kind of spaghetti junction of cables. So sadly, to power the whole lot is a Molex connector. Yeah, it's a Molex connector. There's not really much you can say about that. It is what it is. This, I feel, the RGB implementation, the fan implementation on this case is what I feel personally has let the case down. Now, feel free to challenge that in the comment section. In fact, please do. I'd love to hear your comments. For me personally, I would have loved to have seen this with separate hub and also separate connections for obviously your RGB and your fan control. I think that would have made a great deal more sense. This is keeping it super simple, so I can understand why a lot of system integrators and PC builders are going to love this case because it's just so simple. Don't have to worry about what motherboard's going in here, don't have to worry about anything. Literally just power up a Molex connector, ship it out to the customer, and they can press the reset button to change the colors. Absolutely flawless execution for system integrators. But for more enthusiast builders who want a little bit more control or a little bit more flexibility, it is going to be a little bit of a nightmare. Now, obviously, you can get additional fans. If you want to put another 2 fans in, you can put them in. They do daisy chain, so you can add another 2 in if should you wish to. And because it's powered off a Molex, which is 12 volt generally, you're not going to have any problems with putting a bunch of fans and LEDs on there. So again, this is going to be one of those reasons why potentially you might want to look at the Forge M rather than the M2, because the Forge M had a nice little control box hub on there with all separate connections for your PWM and also for your addressable RGB. So if those things are important to you, which I know for a fact there's going to be some people out there that are going to find that a very important thing because they do love to have that really granular control over their fans, etc., then definitely that is worth looking at. But like I said, for system builders, people keeping it cheap, keeping it simple, You can put in here an A320 motherboard with a slightly older Ryzen processor, or even a 5600G. You can build a knockout little system, which is going to be super, super easy to kind of look after in terms of support. It's unlikely someone's going to phone you up and say, how do I control the fans? It's one of those things that generally doesn't happen. But certainly I just wanted you all to be aware that this is, for me, I consider both a flaw and also a positive, depending on which way you're looking at it. Moving down, so we've got this hard drive caddy, which we discussed already, power supply section. There is ventilation on the bottom of the power supply section, so if we flip this around, you can see there is 2 screws there. So if you want to remove the hard drive cage, you can do. Take it out, chuck it in the bin, do whatever you want with it. You've got the filter on the bottom here. Again, because it's a relatively inexpensive case, we've just got a simple foil shield on there which you can take out. It's actually quite a good one. Normally these are actually quite flimsy and horrible. This one's actually not too bad. It's pretty decent and seems to hold its shape quite well. Ventilation wise, again, no issues there. It does what it's meant to do. Something else I like on here, which is a really stupid thing, but it's something which affects me a great deal on a daily basis, is the feet. So the feet are nice, done well, and they're foam padded. So the foam is obviously going to do 2 things. It's going to reduce vibrations going through to your desk surface. So if you're like me and you've got an IKEA desk, which is a hollow desk, you're going to get vibrations come through no matter what, but this will certainly help with that. And they don't leave marks. Foam doesn't leave marks. Rubber generally tends to leave marks on desks, unless you've got like a glass top desk or something. But for most of us, if you've got a white IKEA desk, rubber feet leave marks, and it's something you have to clean up all the time. So for me, that works. Very simple thing. I'm easily pleased in some respects, especially when it comes to feet. Anyway, moving on. So let's take a look at the top of the case now. So you see we've got ventilation here. This is something else again. I know this is a style thing because it matches with the rest of the kind of holes in the case. Personally, the ventilation, I can understand why they've done this. They've done a slightly kind of more tight mesh, or smaller holes but with more metal in the way, because essentially most people aren't going to be building high-end systems in this. At least I wouldn't have thought so. So for ventilation purposes, this is going to be fine. It's going to keep dust out, keep fingers out, all that kind of stuff. And also because of the size of the holes, you don't really need to have an additional filter on there because there's not going to be a huge amount of airflow. So they've saved a little bit of money not having to have a magnetic filter on the top. So yeah, that kind of works. I personally, I like to have a little bit of convection airflow going, so I'd have liked to have seen those holes being drilled out just a little bit bigger, just to give a little bit more airflow, less metal, more mesh or more holes. For me, that works, but you can, like I said, put 2 120mm fans in here. Don't put a radiator in there, it's just going to choke it to death because those holes just aren't big enough to let enough air through. For convection purposes, absolutely fine, but for actual radiators, no, I wouldn't advise that at all, and you're going to struggle to get it to fit with motherboard clearance, etc, etc. Moving down to the I/O, so we've got a power button, we've got the reset switch, which has obviously been repurposed at the moment for the addressable RGB, so you just press that button and you can cycle through. Really nice thing, which is something which is quite pleasing, is 2 USB 3.0 ports. That's a nice thing to see these days. Legacy ports, the USB 2 now kind of are dying a little bit of a death, so nice to see that those 2 are included. Also a separate headphone and microphone jack, which is again awesome. Not everybody's got a combo headset which they want to plug in, so for a lot of people you might have a specific microphone or you might have a specific headset that you like using. So yeah, nice to have the option to plug in either. So that's the tour of the case. Let's put a power supply in here, get this thing fired up and see what the RGB is like. Okay, so I've put the power supply in and you can see now we've got the RGB fired up. So I'm going to be completely silent now so you can hear the noise of the fans. Hopefully that's coming through. There is definitely a, it's not an overly annoying noise, it's basically the sound of air flowing. But I think for some people it might be a little bit too much to have constantly. Now this room, we've got other computers, obviously there's one behind me, we've got Cap's computer over there, my computer over there, there's a fridge, we've got all kinds of noises going on. This is a real home. So this is definitely the loudest thing in the room by a considerable margin in my opinion, which again for some people it may not be a problem. If we move it further away, yeah, I can still hear it, it's clear as day. So for some people that is going to be annoying, which again, going back to what I said a little bit earlier, you might want to look at the Forge M. system integrators, they're going to absolutely love this case. It's so simple. They can put in pretty much any power supply, any motherboard. It isn't going to be a problem. Literally, just put anything in here and it's just going to look great. And I think arguably it's one of the nicest looking micro ATX cases I've seen in a long time, especially if you're not a fan of the kind of more squat cases like the Citadel Mesh, which is quite a wide boy, and obviously the Aero Core Atomic, those kind of things, they tend to be quite squat. Whereas this actually doesn't look like it's a small case. It just looks like it's a compact tower, which is a very, very good selling point. And obviously there are elements of it which look like the fractal Meshify. It's got that kind of vibe to it with that front panel, which quite a few manufacturers are kind of going along with that same idea. It looks good, so why not copy it? Or at least try and emulate it in some way. Yeah, anyway, so that's my thoughts on it. Let's have a look at the RGB. So all we need to do is press the reset button, which is on the top, so it's nice and easy. So if you press and hold the button, it'll flash, and then that will transfer the system over to your motherboard. If you've got a motherboard installed with addressable RGB features, such as MSI, Gigabyte, etc., etc., as long as it's on that 5-volt, 3-pin addressable RGB header, absolutely no problems. If you want it back on, so you just press the reset button again, which is obviously repurposed as an RGB button in this instance. So we've got our rainbow puke, which actually, it looks really nice. And if those fans were maybe half or 3/4 of the speed, I would have no issues with this whatsoever. I'll be completely honest with you on that. It looks great. The fans, the diffuser and all that kind of stuff, I think looks excellent. So you've got the various chase patterns fading through the various colors. Obviously, most of you have probably seen this kind of thing before, but I wanted to go through so you know exactly what to expect if you are putting a motherboard in here which doesn't have addressable RGB, or maybe it's an older board that has just RGB, not addressable, so potentially you could use it in that sort of setup as well. So then we've got our fading colors, another form of kind of rainbow disco puke. You get the general idea. So then you've got your statics, red, green, blue, white. The white is actually quite a nice white as well, very white, not that off-white kind of bluey white which we get, which you might be able to see actually in the background. Some of the stuff in there is a little bit bluey white. Anyway, I digress. So we've got the kind of, I think it's supposed to be yellow, but it's more of like a kind of acidic yellow. And then we've got our cyan, magenta, and then you can turn the whole lot off should you wish to. Although if you turn it off, you might as well just buy the case without fans, which you can do as well also. I'll put links to that in the video description also. So then we go back to our unicorn puke, which we'll stick with because I do kind of like that. So there we go, that is the Tecware Forge M2. I'll be honest with you, you've probably got this from the review anyway. It's probably not the case for everybody. Again, like I said, builders, system integrators, this is perfect. It really is. It keeps things nice and simple, relatively inexpensive, in that sort of £45 mark. Personally, for me, I think at that sort of price point, there is an awful lot of competition, especially on the market at the moment. If you've seen any of our previous reviews, you'll see there's a whole wide range of cases which we've looked at. Anything from kind of £30 up to £250. A little bit of everything. So this, in terms of what you get size-wise, it's hard to beat. Micro ATX is always one of those difficult ones where, because they don't sell quite in the volumes that the standard ATX does, quite often you'll find yourself paying a very small premium for a smaller case. And as you go into ITX, obviously things get stupidly expensive. So it would be nice to see things kind of reverse the other way. So ITX being the cheapest, Micro ATX being a little bit more expensive, than ATX being the most expensive. But currently it doesn't quite work out like that for some bizarre reason. Economies of scale, I'm assuming. Talking of economies of scale, if you do want to get this a little bit cheaper, you can get the Tecware Forge M2. There is a version that comes without fans as well, so that will save you an additional £10 to £15 depending where you're shopping. Like with most things, because Tecware sell their products in a wide range of places all around the world, UK, Europe, etc., you will find the prices changing dramatically. So don't be surprised if you pick up one of these for somewhere in the region of about £35, but likewise don't be overly surprised if you see it on the shelves for £50 to £55. It really is that kind of case where, depending on who's selling it, where they're selling it, import duties, etc., the price will fluctuate massively. I'll try and do my best to give you the best prices I can in the comments section below and also the video description below. I have actually got another case coming up from Tecware, which is going to be their Tecware Forge L, which is basically the exact opposite of this. It's huge, so we'll be taking a look at that one. So if you want to see that one, don't forget to subscribe and click the chime icon, and we'll see how that goes. I'm a big fan of Tecware. I like what they do. I've still got the Tecware VXR in the PC behind me. That's been there pretty much for the long haul recently, and I'm very loath to actually change it for anything else until something else comes along which I think looks as nice for the money. Certainly with this one, again, yeah, I'm wittering on. I can't help it. I really can't emphasize enough. It's a really lovely looking case. Me personally, I just wish they'd had the option of either having it with PWM fans with addressable RGB hub. For me, that would have made a massive difference, and if they could have done that at the same price, this would have been an absolutely killer chassis. It really would. But what I think isn't important, what you think is, so go ahead and knock yourselves out in that comment section below. Thanks again, as always, to Tecware for sending this for review purposes. I do appreciate it. I may have come across slightly negative towards this, but I want to give a balanced and honest opinion. There's no point me getting stuff sent to me and then just smiling and being happy because I've got something for free. It doesn't work like that, because you'll go out and buy it, or people will go out and buy it and they'll feel misled, and yeah, it's not a good thing all round. So thank you very much for Tecware for sending it. My comments are completely honest, and hopefully you appreciate that, and hopefully you guys do as well. And if you do, hit the subscribe button and the chime icon to get more like this on a daily basis in your inbox. But for now, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.